Today I'm going to be doing my quarterly series check-in. I haven't done one in a while actually. I think the last one I posted was back in the summer. But to be fair, I haven't really been doing much series readings, or at least making much progress on the series that I said that I would back in the summer. So it's not the end of the world that I haven't updated you in quite a while. I really enjoy posting these semi-regularly. I wish I was doing it more often because I really like talking about my series progress, and I feel like it's kind of motivating most of the time to help me focus on series and come up with a, immediate plan for my series reading. I've already spoken about my priority series for 2025 during this Bookmas, so go and check out that video if you haven't already. In this video, I'm going to be wrapping up the series that I have recently read or started, and then at the end, I'll talk about my immediate plans for my series reading. So the first series that I would like to talk about is the Powerless series. I started this one back in June, and I gave the first book 2 stars. So unfortunately, this is a series DNF. I really did not enjoy this first book. If you don't know, this is a popular romantasy book talk series. The first book follows a main character who is kind of living in the slums with her best friend, who is also a really talented seamstress, and the main character, her whole family are dead. She saves the prince's life one day, and then she has to take part in some trials. A lot of us really enjoy trial fantasy. I don't know if that's like an actual subgenre, probably not, but a lot of us do obviously get on with it. But in this case, I just didn't like it. And I think that's more to do with the writing style than the genre or the topic itself. I did not get on well with this book. It was overly long, for one thing. The author, I felt like, was trying to go for like a poetic, romantic sort of writing style, and it just didn't work with this trial-based fantasy action-packed world. And there was also a weird love triangle that I didn't like. I feel like it was borrowing a lot from Red Queen and The Hunger Games, and the similarities were glaring, so I didn't get on with it, and unfortunately that means that I'm DNFing the series and I won't be carrying on with it. A series that I started and I did really enjoy was the Crowns of Neaxia series. So I read The Serpent and the Wings of Night, I read the novella, which was 6 Scorched Roses, and I read The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, which is book 2. That's the ending to the main character's story, but now the series will carry on following a new main character who does appear in the first books. I really enjoyed the first book. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was really surprising. Again, this is a romantasy book, or fantasy romance book rather, which has some trials in it. The main character does go through some trials, but in this case, I don't feel like it was sort of derivative. I feel like the author really made it her own, even though it followed a sort of classic book trope. The second book did drag on a little bit, to be fair. I gave that one 4 stars, and it followed the classic sort of journeying and travelling thing, which last books in a series often do, and I didn't like that so much, but I still enjoyed it, and I enjoyed reading about the characters. Quite liked the world building with the vampires and the gods and goddesses and stuff, so yeah, I really enjoyed this one, and I will be carrying on with the third book in the series, which now begins Misha's story. I'm hoping to carry on with that in the new year. I carried on with the Housemaid series. I read book 2. I enjoyed it, but it was a lot like the first. I feel like it was basically a carbon copy. I didn't get on well with the romance in this one either, so it wasn't as good as the first book. I feel like the author has found a good thing and is rolling with it without trying anything new. So unfortunately, I gave this one 2 stars. I do still want to read the third book because I think as long as I don't read it too close to the second, I can still enjoy it. I think it's still going to be alright, like a good fast-paced thriller when I need like a palate cleanser or something from all of the fantasy books that I read. But unfortunately, I didn't really like the second book. In case you don't know, The Housemaid is a series, it's a thriller series, which follows a woman who is hired to be a nanny for a rich family, but this rich family are really off. There's something weird going on with them, and they drag the main character into whatever's going on with them, and things get darker and darker. And then the second book, she is out of that original situation, but then she gets pulled into another with, again, a rich family who are going through seemingly marital issues, like there's something going on with them, and the main character has to figure out what. The first book was decent. It wasn't like the best book ever. It definitely wasn't the most unique book, but again, it was enjoyable, and I read it in probably less than a day, I think, because it is so fast-paced and easy to read. Another really good series that I started was Her Majesty's Royal Coven. I read books 1 and 2, and I'm planning on reading the novella this month, I hope, if I have time. So this is a series about a group of witches, some of which are part of Her Majesty's Royal Coven, which is a branch of the government that's really secretive and is for witches. And in the first book, there is a child who is said to be like the Antichrist, and there are all of these prophecies surrounding this child. And the main group of witches, most of them are really good friends, but they start arguing about what is the best thing to do with this child. Some of them are arguing like they just need to kill it because they can't take the risk. Others are saying this is the child, like we need to give them a chance to not fuck up, basically. I loved the first book, I gave it 5 stars. I gave the second book 3.5, I think, because again, it was a traveling book, it sort of dragged, and I feel like the author has forgotten what to do with one of the main characters, and she's just sort of like floating along doing nothing important. I hope that the third book, when it comes out, will pick up again and be a really amazing ending. I feel like Juno Dawson is taking a lot of time to write it properly, which is good. And I'm hoping the novella will be fun as well. The novella is like a prequel. It's set during the time where the coven was created, which was after the death of Anne Boleyn. So I'm hoping that's going to be a good one, and you'll obviously hear about it in either my December or January wrap up. I finished off Something is Killing the Children. This is a graphic novel series that I started at the beginning of the year. It's a horror series. It follows Erica Slaughter, who is a monster hunter, and she was previously part of this monster hunting guild, but she separated from them because she doesn't agree with their practices for good reason, and so it's followed her all along as she has tried to save some children from monsters, because in this world children can manifest the monsters and adults can't see them unless you're part of this guild. So that's a really good series, really emotional, really fun, really dark and gory as well. So I gave that final book in the series 4 stars. I reread Catching Jordan by Miranda Keneally, which I read for the first time like years ago when it first came out. This is a YA contemporary book. I enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 stars. I think that's about what I gave it the first time that I read it as well. And I basically reread it because I had it on my shelf and I wanted to see if I would ever carry on with the series. I think I would, but not anytime soon. I might see if they ever appear on like Kindle Unlimited or something, and if I want a really short contemporary book then I will pick it up, but it's not really a priority. But I've recapped it now, so if I ever want to go back to it, then I've got the recap to refresh my memory. I carried on with the Stormlight Archive. I read Oathbringer parts 1 and 2. I didn't quite get to Rhythm of War because I read Oathbringer in November and I thought it was really boring, so I gave that 3 stars and 2.5 stars. So yeah, I didn't rate it very highly. I thought it was really poorly paced and just I didn't like it, so that's a shame. But I think I will carry on with the Stormlight Archive, just maybe not anytime soon. I'm gonna see what people think of Wind and Truth. It's out. I know it's out the day I'm recording this, actually. I'm gonna see what people's reactions are and see if it's worth investing all of my time into it, otherwise it might be a DNF. I started a romance series which starts with A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon, but I've decided to end it there. I don't really have any interest in carrying on because I gave this one 3 stars. It was alright. It's a witchy book about a witch and a demon, obviously, and it's a romance book, so they get together. I really like the witchy elements and the whole thing where they were saving the town, but I don't really feel the need to carry on with the series because this was just alright. It's technically a DNF, but like a nice DNF. I started the series which starts with When the Moon Hatched. I can't remember what the series is called, and I'm going to carry on with it because I did quite like the first book. This is a fantasy series, probably romantasy, kind of, about a main character who is a bounty hunter and she has to get whisked away by this king because she is about to be executed, and he saves her from his brother who is also a king. There are 3 brothers, they rule 3 different kingdoms, and it's kind of like an enemies to lovers situation. The dragons aren't really a massive thing in this book, but I'm hoping they're going to be a massive deal in the next one, and I don't think the next one's coming out until autumn next year. I won't be reading that anytime soon or carrying on with the series, but I did enjoy the first one enough to continue, and I did cry over the dragons, so that's a good sign. I also read A Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and I think this is going to be the first book in a companion series because the author has just announced her next one. So I'm including that in here. I gave this book 5 stars. I absolutely loved it, so I would highly recommend it. This is the story of a young witch who has to go and look after and train 3 other baby witches, basically, even though witches aren't meant to gather in large groups because it could be dangerous. But she does go to this house and helps them, and it's like a found family situation. It's really cozy and lovely, and it was just brilliant. And then the final series that I kind of tackled in the last few months was the House in the Cerulean Sea series. I don't really know if that's the title. I read Somewhere Beyond the Sea at the end of November, and I did enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars, and I'm really happy to wrap up this series. I think it ended well. It didn't really end the way that I would have wanted it to. It was really overly dramatic, I think, and it was just not my favourite way of ending a series. But I had a good time with it, and again, it was cozy and just lovely. That went really well. I feel like my series reading could have gone better because my TBR in my last series video was very ambitious, but because I'm such a mood reader, I just didn't really get around to them, and I suppose that's okay. I'm trying to figure out my TBR for the next quarter or so. I'm not gonna lie, going to Australia at the end of December is really throwing me off, because even though like I can still read while I'm out there, I just know it's going to have a massive impact on probably the entire month of January for me. So I'm a bit conflicted about how much to put on my series TBR for the next few months, especially because in February I will be doing 28 books in 28 days again, and that means that I probably won't be able to read any massive fantasy series. But I have picked out a few books that I would like to try to focus on. There are a couple of book series that I would really like to start because I need to recap them for recaption. So the first one is The Crimson Moth. I think it's also called Heartless Hunter in the US, I think, which is a fantasy series. So the second book is coming out early next year. And then also A Fate Inked in Blood. The sequel to that is coming out early next year as well. So I really need to read that. And I do actually have that from the library, so I should have just gotten it out from the bag. So those are two really popular ones that I would really like to start early on in the year, because there's kind of like a time crunch on those because I need to recap them. I've picked out 6 books from my shelves that I would really like to read, and these are all first books in a series. Again, I feel like I'm being a bit ambitious here, but I have also spoken about most of these in my other like TBR videos for the new year. So that means that there's a lot of overlap and I have something to like hold me accountable. So the first one I've picked out is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This is like a massive book talk. I think it's a romantasy book, if not just fantasy. Got no idea what it's about, but everyone has been talking about it and has absolutely loved it. So I'm convinced that I will too. I hope so anyway. I've also picked out Half Soul because while I'm in the cozy sort of mood, I think this would be a really good one to read in like the darker winter months. Again, for a cozy read, I've chosen Chilling Effect. I'm so hyped about this one now that I've been talking about it in almost every single video in December. This is the cozy space opera with psychic cats. I would really love to read this one ASAP, so I'd like to get to this one. I'm thinking in January when I'm back from my holiday. A bit of a rogue choice, I've also picked out Stormfront by Jim Butcher. This is the first book in the Dresden Files. I've got books 1 and 2 already, and I have actually read the first chapter of this one and I didn't hate it. I'm a bit nervous because I think this is like a very bro-y male written fantasy series, but I did say that I wanted to read more urban fantasy in 2025 and kind of go back to my roots, and I think this one will be an easy one to try that with. I'm not convinced I'm going to love it because my friend Justine hates it, but I do quite like urban fantasy series like this, so there's a good chance that I might enjoy it. I've also picked out Ascendant, which is the first book in the Songs of Chaos series. This is a dragon fantasy series and I've already started this. I've read 111 pages. I'm going to need to restart because I put it down months ago and didn't carry on with it, even though I was loving the first 100 pages. The main character, he really wants to be a dragon rider and he hatches an egg even though he shouldn't, and the baby dragon turns out to be blind. So he's raising a blind dragon basically, and my only complaint so far is that the dragon isn't a baby for long enough. It grows very quickly. So I'd like to carry on with this. I've got the entire trilogy. Do you think the author has brought out another book? I don't know if it's like a continuation of the series or if it's like a companion series following someone else. I do think I'm going to love this, especially from what I've seen so far. So I'm putting this on the high priority list for the next quarter, and I think it'll be really fast paced as well, which I will need if I read it in February. And then finally I've picked out The Girl of Fire and Thorns. Again, this will be a fast paced fantasy book, especially because it's a reread for me, and I'm hoping maybe I can read one book from this series every quarter or so and finish it off next year. That would be ideal. I first read this one about 10 years ago and I remember really enjoying it, but I don't remember much about it at all. So I'm a bit nervous about how I'm going to feel about it in the year of 2025, but I'm going to try my best and I do think I will enjoy it again. And again, because it's an old school YA book and it's a reread, it should be a really fast read for me, and it's probably one that I can read in February without really causing any disasters in my challenge. So I think that's enough to focus on in the first quarter of the year. That is, what, 8 books? I might throw in ACOTAR as well in February if I feel like it, but for now I'm going to focus on these ones and we'll see how I do. I will try to post another video towards the end of March to tell you guys how I've been doing. I'm hoping 2025 will be the year of series for me and I can just power through loads of them because I do love reading series and getting really invested in the world and the characters. It's just I'm not very good at doing it. So that will be something that I'd like to focus on in the next year. Let me know how you do with reading series, if you've got any series plans for the rest of the year or for 2025 of course, because we've got what, 2 weeks left. And thank you for watching. I'll speak to you all in the next video. Bye.